This will be part one of the build process where we'll put together the inner core of the tombstone, which consists of the enclosure, the monitor, and the plastic base. This is the kit that will build the enclosure for the monitor. It has the front, back, two sides, a top, and the bottom. Also included is a sheet of plexiglass that will protect the monitor from bad weather. This will be the first piece that we will build in this project. We are going to glue all of these pieces together using contact cement and a small brush. We will start with the front piece, gluing on the sides, top, and bottom. When attaching the bottom piece, make sure that the wider side of the front piece is to your right. Once you've completed the box, let it dry thoroughly according to the instructions of your contact cement. Leave the back off for now. Turn the box over while the cement is drying and make sure that all the pieces fit snug together. You may have to hold it for a few seconds or maybe a minute in order to make the bond secure, but go around the perimeter and make sure that you have good tight joints. Next step, turn the box over, take your plexiglass sheet, remove the protective cover, clean it if necessary, then take your contact cement, brush it all around the inner rim of the box, and then place the plexiglass inside. Make sure that all the sides are pressed snugly up against the plexiglass and let that thoroughly dry. Also check the front of the container and make sure that the seams between the foam board and the plexiglass are secure. Glue if needed. After the contact cement is dried, take your favorite silicone sealer, make sure it's good grade, and put a bead of caulk going all the way around between the plexiglass and the foam board. On the front side, at the bottom, this is the only place you'll need to put the silicone sealer. Put a very thin line on the very bottom. This is the only area on the outside where water might collect, and this will help repel it. After the sealer has completely dried and cured, place the monitor within the box using the orientation as shown. Along the right-hand side, you can see the infrared receiver for the monitor remote. Using a marker, make a line that denotes where the IR receiver ends. The reason why we made these marks is so that we can create a small slit so that the remote's IR beam can register with the monitor and you can control it. If you just put the monitor within this container, the container itself would block that beam. That's why we made the two lines so we know exactly where the IR remote of the TV is located. What you want to do is to take a small piece of wood. You could use either a yardstick or a paint stick. Cut a small piece of wood, put a piece of wood on either side of the markings that you made, and you'll notice that when you put the TV back within the container, there'll be a small slot that will allow the beam to hit the sensor and you can control your monitor. In my case, I didn't use a yardstick or a paint stick. My wife had these little shovels that she uses in her art. I took two of them, I painted them black, and then I glued them with the contact cement right at the markings I made, indicating the edges of the IR sensor on the monitor. When you place the monitor inside the container now, it will leave a tiny little slit so that the IR beam of the remote will control the monitor. If you get anything on the plexiglass, whether it's the sealant or the contact cement, get yourself a bottle of this in a soft cloth and it'll take it off the plexiglass without clouding it or scratching it. Insert the monitor into the container as shown. Note the orientation. Secure, but do not glue the back to the container. Painter's tape is perfect for this. It's now ready for testing. You're ready to test your remote. Before placing your monitor in the container, make sure that you set it up first, do the whole configuration, and then you can go ahead and place it within the container. Yeah, so all you need to do now is to test your remote. Just see if you can turn it on and off and see if the functions work. Remember that we have the little slits over here, and yeah, it works. So you can turn it on, you can turn it off, use your remote. You're all set. We're done with the monitor and its container for now. We're gonna move on to the base of our gravestone. And here's the flower pot and cover that I suggested you buy. I've already gone ahead and started by cutting out the 3.5-inch hole. That hole will be the location of the exhaust fan, and as you can see, the louvered exhaust cover. Next, we're going to install the cooling fan. Install the fan first on the outside of the planter. This will allow you to create the guide holes, which will make the install easier. Just make sure that the fan's centered and that it'll fit within the box when you try to install it from the other side. Now remove the fan from the front and now install it in the back. Screws from the outside in. Try to center your fan. I didn't really center mine very well, but you get the general idea. So remove the fan once again from the back. Now that we know that it fits, in my case, not well centered, but go ahead and remove it and then take the screws and put them back in the holes, outside going in. And then you want to take your exhaust fan cover. It's the square 4-inch one. Make sure that the louvers are, of course, pointed down so that the rain won't enter. And then use the small tapping screws to secure it to the plastic planter as shown. Now in my case, because mine was off-centered, I used one of the screws for the exhaust fan, and I used it for the cover as well. Otherwise, just use the tapping screws. Get yourself a small drill bit and make guide holes. It'll be much easier to install the tapping screws with a guide hole. Make sure that the cover is secured. Now, if you look on the inside, you'll see that those tapping screws did come through and are protruding a little bit. Don't worry about it because the fan will still fit. You can reinstall the exhaust fan. I promise it's the last time. With the power cord here at the bottom, which is actually the top of the gravestone bottom. All right, next, get your caulking gun and put some caulk all the way around the edges of the exhaust fan cover, making a complete seal, 360 degrees all the way around. Also note to the right there, add a 1-inch hole. I used a 1-inch hole punch. Go ahead and make a 1-inch opening. It's through here that we're going to run our power and video cables. If you do use a 1-inch hole punch, hold on to that piece of plastic because we're going to need it in a later step. Now we can go ahead and glue the planter tray to the planter box. Unfortunately, because this is a planter box and not the bottom of a tombstone, you'll notice that we have these 4 projections right here. Those are going to be your only points of contact for the glue. So apply your glue to those 4 points, put the top on it, and then let it set. At this point, you're going to have to wait for the contact glue to fully set. So we're talking about waiting at 24 hours for a full cure. Once the base is dried, center the enclosure on the top of the base, then use a marker to outline the slot that's in the enclosure on the top of the base of the tombstone. Using the saw of your choice, cut out the slot that you outlined on the top of the tombstone base. In my case, I used a jigsaw. Did a great job. So of course I forgot one step, so don't be like me. But before you attach the enclosure to the base, you want to take a caulk gun and run a bead throughout here all the way around 360 degrees. Fill in that gap with a good dose of caulk, and that'll seal that from water and air. And let that set before you proceed further. All right, it's finally time to attach the enclosure to the tombstone base. For this, you're going to use your contact cement. You're going to want to apply glue to both the top of the tombstone base and the bottom of the enclosure. You want to make sure that we get a good cement seal. Check the seal between the enclosure and the top of the base, 360 degrees. If you notice any warpage or where it's not touching, you can use lightweight clamps to hold it in place so it'll glue correctly. You're done for now. This is another case where you're going to have to give it 24 hours to cure. All right, home stretch now for finishing the enclosure. Time to put the monitor into the enclosure itself. First thing, before doing that, clean your monitor screen from all smudges or any dirt. Same thing with the plexiglass. Go ahead and use like Windex and clean the glass so you remove all the debris, and then go ahead and put the TV in. First thing you're going to do is run the cables. Go ahead, start with the power cable right here. Just run underneath the TV through the base and out the 1-inch hole that we previously drilled, and pull all the slack that you can. Next, take the HDMI cable extender, 3-footer, plug it into HDMI 1, run the cable out through the slot, and then again out through the 1-inch hole, and pull as much slack as you can. Finally, take the USB power cable for our fan and run it through here and connect it to the USB port right there. Pull up as much slack as you can so you don't leave cable dangling with inside of the base. Secure all your lines. I use duct tape here. Go ahead, secure all your lines this way. Don't block any vents. And again, when you secure it, pull up as much slack as you can, particularly on the USB cable. Taking a closer look at the 1-inch hole we drilled, take the piece that we saved, the 1-inch cutout. What you'll do is you'll cut a slot into that piece, and then you can run these 2 cables through there. And on the back side here, secure this piece of plastic in place with some duct tape. For final step, use your silicone sealant to seal the entire area around the cables coming out from the 1-inch hole. Let that dry before continuing. Put on the back of the enclosure. Note here where this part of the monitor is located. This denotes an area where there's very little space right here. We're going to put the intake vent right here where there's plenty of room, as opposed to this area where, again, no space at all. Once you have this in place on the back here, and then take your marker and draw your circle. Additionally, especially if you're going to use a hole punch for the drill, you want to denote the center of the circle. Using the hole you just drew as a guideline, cut a 3.5-inch hole in the back of the foam board. Apply a generous amount of cement around the outline of the hole you drew, and then place the vent cover so it covers the hole. You can use tapping screws to screw into the foam board to help hold that vent cover in place until the glue dries. And then once the glue dries, take your silicone sealant and apply all around the edges of your vent cover, so you get a good airtight seal between the vent cover and the foam board. Now, secure the back of the foam board to the enclosure using tape. We're going to run some tests before we glue the back to the enclosure. Using your remote, make sure that you can turn the monitor on and off. Turn the tombstone around and check the exhaust vent. You should be able to feel air coming out. That means the fan is working. Grab your contact cement and a brush. It's time now to glue the back to the enclosure. Prop up the tombstone frame so that the enclosure is perfectly flat and does not warp in any way. Keep checking to make sure that you get tight seals on those tabs. Just monitor it for the first 10 minutes or so. Apply more glue as needed to make sure that you get those tight seals. While that's drying, grab your sheet metal, and we're going to start making the cowls that will cover both vents and help protect them from the worst of weather. I had a 4-inch duct connector lying around, and I'm going to use it for this project. What I did was I snapped the pins that were holding it together, flattened it out a little bit, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take sheet metal and cut this in half. So I'll have a cowl on top and a cowl on the bottom. Using tin snips, I've cut out 2 cowls, one for the intake vent and the other for the output vent. I'm going to shape them now so that they fit the outline of the vents. Bend the cowls so they fit around the vent openings. You may have to cut the piece in order to make it fit. Using your contact cement, glue the cowls into place. You're not looking for 100% connection between the cowl and the foam board or the plastic tombstone base. You're just looking for enough connection so the cowls are glued and held in place. When the glue is dry, go ahead and use your silicone sealant and seal both cowls, both inside and out. You've noticed by now that our cemetery tombstone here is a little bit top heavy. So to give it a bigger footprint and make it far more stable, I use a serving tray to act as the base. Turn the serving tray upside down, center our tombstone on the serving tray, and use a marker to denote its location on the tray. Using a brush and your contact cement, apply a generous amount along the lines you drew, and then replace the tombstone back into the position and let the glue dry. Glue is a temporary hold. We're going to use 1-inch tapping screws to secure the base to the tray. An easy way to do this is to use the tapping screw like a push pin. Just stick the screw into the plastic until it has a little bit of a firm grip. Then take a tack hammer and go ahead and hammer it down so that at least it's below the lip of the edge. Then you can use a screwdriver manual and keep using it until you feel the screw start to grip. Then you can use the socket wrench to easily tighten it all the way down. In my case, I used a 1/4-inch socket. And for this, I used 5 of those tapping screws in the front and 4 tapping screws in the back. So the next step then is to seal the entire thing. As you can see, I sealed all the edges on the container. I also did the edge between the enclosure and the top of the base. And then finally, I also did the base and our final stand on the bottom here. Don't forget to do underneath here as well so that you completely seal the entire thing. Now you'll notice that the enclosure tends to lean a bit. That's for 2 reasons. One is that it has a really high center of gravity, and the enclosure itself is not very, let's say it's not structurally sound, and there's a lot of give and take in it. Don't worry about this for right now. The next part of the build is adding the expanding foam, and the way that we'll apply the expanding foam, it'll basically give the enclosure a spine that'll allow it to support the television, which at the moment is leaning slightly back. Until we do the next step, which is applying the expanding foam, find a place where you can lay the enclosure flat so that the enclosure itself does not deform. Please be careful when carrying this too. You can see that the tapping screws protrude through the bottom of the tray and are incredibly sharp. Fortunately, I have an easy and cheap solution, which we will do in the next step, which involves using the expanding foam.